Welcome to the Beau Show. Everyone knows by now that what we thought might happen has come true. Vaccine mandates are a reality. As soon as the FDA approved the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, it seemed like it was only a matter of time before government decided to impose its will on both the public and the private sector. We have never seen a medical intrusion of this kind, really. And that's worth some reflection. Because any time that liberty is being jeopardized, we have to take a step back. You don't have to be pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine to reflect upon medical freedom and medical privacy rights. The unfortunate thing is that we have seen a national and even global campaign for vaccines, yet very, very little on the actual treatments and therapeutics. I remember thinking about this some months ago and thinking, why is it that anyone who talks about the treatment for COVID is demonized, but there is a massive campaign for the vaccine? It seems like the medical community would promote both equally as options, especially once it was learned that the virus could break through the vaccine. It was not foolproof, and no vaccine ever really is. And for those that have been hesitant for any myriad of reasons, they may think even more about whether they want it or not. I know many women who hesitated because of reproductive harm reasons. I know that others simply waited to see whether the FDA would approve it. And none of us know the long-term effects because it's just so new. But then there are other legitimate reasons, such as religious exemptions or other medical reasons. And I have always maintained that the vaccine should be voluntary. That's how we maintain a level of choice. Yet the left especially has been pushing these mandates. It's a choice now of take it or get fired. And I don't know if anyone other than those who saw the bigger picture could imagine a scenario where the workers that we need most, nurses, policemen, firefighters, would be fired for noncompliance. Those are the folks who risk their lives every day. And now the government is going to demonize and punish them? Risk their livelihood? The whole reason for clinical trials is that a patient is opting for the benefit of the drug over the possible risk. It is an option available to them, and it's a deeply personal choice. I've listened to ads even on Spotify which try to frame this as, oh, you have a choice, sure, but take it. And explain this, Biden is not mandating vaccination for those crossing the border. How in the hell do you figure that? This past week, a vaccine mandate went into place in New York for municipal employees. As a result, hundreds of firefighters called in sick, bringing the total number of sick outs to 2,300. That's a lot of firefighters. Many of the public safety unions are pushing back on these mandates, which is causing some concern over whether New York can adequately do its job in fighting fires if so many firefighters are calling in sick because of this mandate. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said about 9,000 employees have called out of a workforce of about 378,000. And these employees are getting unpaid leave. They're willing to jeopardize their own salaries because of this mandate. And that should tell you something. FDNY Firefighters Association President Andrew Ansbro said that this mandate is causing a mass exodus, causing those that are currently working to have to work even harder. He maintains that the union is not anti-vaccine, but is anti-mandate. And I think that's a very common sense approach. People demonize people like that as anti-vax and anti-science, but all they are saying is that they are anti-mandate. Yet you have Stephen Colbert out there creating a Broadway-style skit pushing the vaccine, as if he had been paid to do this as an ad campaign. This also does not address the concept of natural immunity from prior infection, a topic that I discussed with Senator Rand Paul. In fact, studies are showing a more lasting effect from natural immunity than the vaccine. So if you had COVID, why would they force you to take the vaccine? Because science? That's what they always claim. The good news is that yes, hospitalizations and infections are down. That is partly a product of the vaccine working and also millions with natural immunity. You have to take both factors into account. It's not just an either or. Just like with the seasonal flu, you will see peaks and declines. But at a time when basic city services have been greatly compromised during this pandemic, you would think that you would want all hands on deck. You would need every employee present. And then you create a vaccine mandate that will dissuade some employees to show up, and it's a threat. It's punitive. So are our cities and streets safer as a result of this? Well, it seems illogical. If you recall, after the George Floyd death, measures were put on the ballot to completely defund or eradicate police departments altogether. But Minneapolis just voted that measure down. It turns out most citizens do want police to keep them safe and do not believe that police departments are so systemically racist that they target black and brown people just to arbitrarily throw them in jail. So we are living in the aftermath of that, where we need police, plus crime is on the rise. And now you want to punish those employees and threaten their livelihoods, which will in turn make cities less safe? Why is that a logical decision? In Chicago, over 300 homicide cases have been cleared, according to Police Chief David Brown. He made a point in his presser to talk about bond court, noting that a juvenile that was recently arrested had been arrested 8 previous times for the same crime because the courts let the criminals out. He recognizes that even the courts are failing the people because there's no deterrence of crime. If cops arrest the same person 8 times for the same crime and they keep getting out, that's not justice. That's just letting another criminal back on the streets. According to the CDC, yes, that CDC, the homicide rose 30% between 2019 and 2020. That's the highest increase in modern history. These were in part due to the effects of the pandemic. Unemployed adults at home, kids are at home rather than at school, nothing to do, stress and anxiety are up, people are on edge, lockdowns are happening. You take a crime-ridden community and you exacerbate that problem. And then the one thing the criminologists are not saying is that the looting and crime sprees that happened during riots and protests last year went unpunished. And that set a precedent. California set a new law that theft under $950 would not be prosecuted. Listen to this exchange between Senator Ted Cruz and CVS executive Ben Dugan about shoplifting in San Francisco.
Is there more theft in San Francisco than elsewhere?
No, sir.
There's not.
Not relative to the amount of stores and market share that we have. It's higher. But
So NBC News was wrong when they said that.
I can only speak to what I see every day on the ground, Senator, and I follow these criminals day to day from state to state and city to city.
So CVS would support other jurisdictions legalizing shoplifting up to $950?
CVS does not support legalizing shoplifting.
Why not?
Senator.
Why not?
We're not going to endorse criminal activity.
But you're saying it has no effect.
I never said it had no effect.
You said there's not worse shoplifting in San Francisco. I find that highly dubious.
No effect, Senator.
Does it have an effect or not?
Yes, of course it does.
What's the effect?
The effect is shoplifting is completely different than organized retail crime. If you're talking about shoplifting, that's a whole different dynamic than organized retail crime.
And so my question is, what's the effect? You guys have the data.
I'm sure I understand your question, Senator. Is there an effect? Do we take losses to shoplifting? Yes, like every other retailer.
And are they greater in jurisdictions that effectively legalize it?
No, they're not.
So then why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting? Your answer's not making any sense, sir.
Here, Cruz makes a point about the effects of decriminalizing shoplifting under $950, which is true in places like San Francisco. And this CVS exec tries to downplay that, arguing semantics over organized crime versus basic shoplifting. This is why I say that crime is up, because there is little consequence, which makes our streets and our cities much less safe. And I think California has a host of cities like that. Now let's look at the military, the other very important guardians of our safety and homeland. Nearly 8,500 active duty Air Force and Space Force members are not vaccinated. Ever since the Pentagon mandated the vaccine, there have been some medical waivers, but very, very few religious exemptions. And this might violate the DoD's own regulations and federal law. These military folks face vaccination or expulsion. I think about Desmond Doss, the conscientious objector who was the subject of the film Hacksaw Ridge. Doss was an Army corporal who objected to holding a gun due to his adherence to his faith as a Seventh-day Adventist. The film depicts how ridiculed he was by his officers for objecting to carrying a weapon. As a result, they made him a medic, and he saved at least 75 men in the Battle of Okinawa and was awarded the Medal of Honor, but not before he was court-martialed for this conscientious objection to holding a weapon. He had valid reason for doing so. So when we think about those who might object to getting the vaccine for medical or religious reasons, we have to think about Desmond Doss. Furthermore, what started in the public and government realm with this vaccine mandate has now bled over into the private sector, which Joe Biden mandated for any private company that has over 100 employees. He's acting like your doctor. But just recently, a federal court struck down the vaccine mandate for private employers, citing grave constitutional issues at stake. The petitioners argue that the mandate exceeds the Occupational and Safety and Health Administration's scope and powers. While the Biden administration will have to respond to this, they are insistent upon using emergency powers to move forward. And see, this is interesting because I feel as though we know that the federal government would start with this mandate there first, and then we have seen that even employees such as firefighters are calling out because of these mandates, which creates a safety issue. Now, we have seen them move into the private sphere, and this vaccine mandate for companies with over 100 employees is eerily reminiscent of the Obama administration's mandate to require businesses with 50 or more employees to cover their health care under Obamacare. Remember that Biden is in many ways just an extension of the Obama administration, although a feeble 2.0. When a public health crisis comes along and you strip away liberty and claim it's for the public good, we have to take a step back. And I will reiterate, you don't have to be gung-ho vaccine fanatic or a skeptic to feel this way. It is a constitutional issue. Although this generation has never seen a pandemic quite like this, we are certainly seeing all of its effects, from crime to anxiety and stress, to broken relationships, to supply chains, to economic woes, to inflation. Just because the government offers a solution doesn't make it the correct one. They can encourage you to get a vaccine, but I don't understand the mandating of it. Remember that Joe Biden was just at COP26 pushing the false narrative of climate catastrophe. If you do your research, you will know that it is not an existential threat. A true existential threat is another lab leak, or funding gain-of-function research with bats, or spiking homicides or domestic abuse caused by high anxiety, or vehicular homicides, which are way up, or unsafe streets, because we have less police and firefighters out there, because they are forcing them to take leave. These are things that pose immediate, direct threats on our daily lives. And when you're trying to get an economy back to pre-pandemic boom, why would you start slapping on new taxes on things and hitting employers with vaccine mandates? It just doesn't make sense. These are not practical solutions. This is why I contend that these mandates, in addition to the pure constitutional issues that they raise, are punitive to both public and private sectors. The medical and religious exemptions to a mandate may be small, but they must be heeded. But that's only necessary because the government has overreached its authority. And with all the vaccine passports and cards you must present in various cities and states, our medical freedom is very much in jeopardy. Yet no ID to vote? Who is to say they won't start doing this for the seasonal flu vaccine or any other medical problem that we face? What we are doing now and how we respond will dictate what will happen in future pandemics. And isn't it interesting that so few talk about natural immunity and therapeutics? If a therapeutic could be developed quicker than a vaccine, why would we not consider that? It could be a lifesaver. I fully support the ingenuity of scientific discovery that can prevent or minimize death, but I'm just seeing one side of the coin, and panic is never a good emotion to base rational decisions upon. It's hard to think rationally when fear pervades your process. Economically, physically, and psychologically, this pandemic took a major toll on us. But the solution to this can't be just, We will tell you what to do with your body if you ever want to work again or be a member of public society. I mean, that's what communist countries do, but not what free societies do. We are so far evolved from our past when plagues and pestilences hit our nation and killed many, but we survived. Our medical advances are vast and our health systems are modern. We of course should look into how to process mass hospitalizations. And trust me, all of Bill Gates' simulations did absolutely nothing for this pandemic. It was a complete joke. We don't even need another simulation again because now we know what will happen. Yet we were just now feeling the effects of what a vaccine mandate can actually do. What started as 2 weeks to flatten the curve, hey everyone, pitch in, went to lockdowns, business closures, mental health breakdowns, economic pains, inflation, and now health intrusion. They are already proving to us that they want to know if you are vaccinated or not. So who's to say that such a delineation won't be a factor in other determinations? Whether you can use public transportation, for instance, or go to a baseball game, or go to school. That's medical discrimination. Because technology is increasing exponentially, the ability to know who you are, how you vote, and what prescriptions you take, and whether you're considered a health liability will be pretty easily known. For that matter, a lot could be known just by our own voluntary sharing on social media as it harvests our data. Be careful of that type of information sharing. And what is ironic is so many of the health suggestions, and I say suggestions lightly here, that the CDC made during this pandemic were not even grounded in scientific certainty, especially things like cloth masks and lockdowns. But so much policy in the public and private sectors was grounded in those recommendations. You still can't get an Uber without a mask, even if that mask is nothing more than spandex over your mouth. But when people's houses are burning down and there aren't enough firefighters to come put it out because their force is depleted from a vaccine mandate, what are you going to do? Tell me again, who is putting people at risk? The firefighter or the official who mandated that policy? If police can't come stop a theft or a murder because they have to social distance, who's to blame for that? If our military shrinks in size and can't defend the very places we need them most, who will take responsibility for that? See, such mandates can affect every single strata of our nation. And ultimately, it's up to us and those that we elect to represent us to either permit such mandates or push back and use the Constitution. Because remember, if they can force this one, they will be able to force others. Every day we make choices about what to put in our bodies, the food we eat, and the beverages that we drink. But what happens when we lose choices like that? Remember that the common good will be used as the reason. And the timing of all of this is quite poor. Here we are headed into heavy retail season with the holidays, and the burden will be on many retailers to implement this mandate. That is, if it stands. Now, while it is true that an employee who doesn't want the vaccine can opt out by weekly tests and wearing masks, it does set an entirely different standard for those employees. And remember that a vaccination is not a guarantee you won't catch or spread COVID-19. It just might be a smaller or asymptomatic case. And that's interesting, because if some studies show that vaccinated people can catch and spread it as easily, if not more, than the unvaccinated, why the need for a mandate? If natural immunity is longer lasting, why a vaccine mandate? You see, if they're going to use science as their justification, they aren't really following it. And in spite of the other obvious constitutional issues this raises, it just seems like an overreach based on lacking evidence, when unilateral medical policy is predicated upon it. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the courts. But let's watch it carefully and look at the legal basis and reasoning, because this is a testing ground and setting a precedent for many future dilemmas of this kind. I'm Beau, and that's the show.